What I want to know is how does one get involved in doing rock work as a woman? Do you really, really want to know? Or do you just want the rehearsed response that I always give? What would happen if we chose to really tell the truth about ourselves? Like if we really, really just told the real truth of our lives? I'm not saying that it's true. I'm saying that it's my truth.
You're listening to Hammered.
I've read different articles about abuse and trauma. One thing that really stuck out was that there's been scientific studies that the human brain doesn't reach maturity until around the age of 25. And when I look back at the age I was during all of this time, I was only about 23 when all of this stuff went down at Regina's. I felt so horrible and so guilty once again. During that week, I had to try to figure out where I was going to go. When I would wake up in the morning, it's like guilt and shame are just sitting at the foot of the bed waiting to jump on me and ride with me through the day, along with their buddy anxiety. Knowing what I know about alcoholism and your central nervous system, it was a perpetual need. It was a perpetual having to get something to make this feeling go away. So during that week, I would continue to bring my vodka home and now read the book that she threw and hit me in the head with. So I started in the beginning, and I would drink this absolute vodka straight out of the bottle, lay in bed, and read the book Alcoholics Anonymous. And it was so interesting because I really got into it. I could really associate with a lot of the stuff that it was talking about, especially about depression and self-centeredness and all these different things I could relate to. And then when I got to the stories, I remember reading the stories and just feeling sorry for the people. And I was thinking, yeah, like they are really bad off. I guess I thought like if you lived in a boxcar, then you were pretty much in the bottom of the barrel. And because I wasn't living out of a boxcar, I guess I just thought that I was okay. But I do know that some seeds were possibly planted. One thing about this book that she threw at me, in the front of the book and in the back of the book, people had signed this book and they had written her notes. They'd written her these like farewell kind of notes. And I put it together that when she left, I guess, a treatment center after jumping off the balcony and breaking both arms and legs, the psychiatric ward, apparently they had probably, sent her to 12-step programs. So I read all these notes that were written to her, to Regina, and my heart just sank, and I would read and realize that she was probably like me to an extent. And I think that's why she kept trying to help me. Regina was trying to find her own way and had pretty much, I think, made peace with some of her demons. It's not my job to take her inventory, but it was just a feeling I got. And she never, ever threw blame at me. I think she understood. So during that week, I had to make decisions, and I finally just threw in the towel and went to my dad and made up some bullshit to, have him let me move back in. I convinced him that, riding my motorcycle from Singleton Road was too far because that's kind of where they lived, and he was closer to my job. And then I told him, that things were getting kind of weird because they were a couple, and I just made some stuff up. And Daddy thought I was doing better, so he agreed to let me come back again. And so there I was. And boy, this time I was going to be different. I was going to stay home. I was going to just be there in those apartments and stay out of trouble. I had really made that vow to myself. And so I would go to work and come back and go to work and come back. And I really loved the kids, the teenagers, and the people in the apartments. It was like a little community. And so, of course, I would drink because there was always somebody to drink with. But I kept it kind of under lock and key. I kind of stuck with the beer, tried to stay away from the liquor. I tried to, that whole beer and wine are okay. That's not really drinking. I mean, people fucking believe that. That's hilarious. If you drink beer or wine, then you're not really drinking. So I would say, yeah, I quit drinking. And it would be like, because I'm not drinking straight vodka. But Michael, the guy that lived across the street, he was just like this guardian angel kid, and I really loved him. And so we would hang out and listen to music and talk and make food. And so his apartment, his mother was always gone, and she worked at the bar downtown, and she was constantly saying, "Are you going to come out tonight? You going to come out tonight?" And I'd go, No, I better not. No, I better not. And I was really trying to not do those things because I knew what kind of road it took me down. So I continued with my job, and I was doing okay with that. And Rick, the guy at the post office, he and I had started forming this sort of friendship, kind of unusual relationship. And he asked me one night if I wanted to come over, and he lived 2 streets from my dad's apartment. And I just told him, no, I can't. And so I blew him off, but it was always in the back of my mind. And so time went by, and one Friday night, my dad had really been drinking. Now, his drinking had started to increase. And he would bring these like suitcases of like Coors Light or Miller Lite, whatever was on sale. And he was drinking more than I had ever seen him drink. And so Saturday morning came, and he was still drunk, and he was still drinking. And it kind of disturbed me because it was one thing when I did it because I was young and I thought that's what young people do. And it was the 80s. But to see him that way the next morning, it kind of upset me. And then I remember we were sitting out on his front little patio, and he said, "Curly, I saw this car up there in that service merchandise parking lot up there. You want to go up there and look at it?" And I said, "What kind of car?" "Oh, it's this little old sports car they got for sale sign in the window. I thought you might like it." And I said, "What kind?" "It's one of them there Datsun 280Zs. Well, honey, my ears perked up, and I thought, 280 fucking Z? Are you kidding me? "Well, yeah, let's go look at it." He goes, "Well, you just drive my truck." So I got in the truck, and I drove him up there. And sure enough, there was this metallic blue 1975 280Z with chrome wheels. I mean, a badass car with a sunroof. And I got out and I walked around and he walked around it and had a phone number. And he says, well, let's drive over there to that there payphone. Let's call that number. So we went over to a payphone and called, and I talked to this guy, and he actually answered, and he said he could meet us up there. So we waited, and Daddy was sitting over there drinking a beer, and it was like 9:30, 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning. So this guy pulls up, and we get out and talk to him, and he starts telling about the car and how he had to get rid of it and la la la. So the man looks at my dad and goes, you want to test drive it? And I was like, oh God. And the man handed him the keys, and Daddy got in the car and he rode around the parking lot real fast. And then he came back and he let me drive it, and it was a stick shift, and I got in that thing, and it was like this dream. Like, I can't even believe this is happening. Like, I've been riding that motorcycle for a while, and I really, really wanted a car, but I knew there's no way that I could buy a car myself. So the guy told my dad how much, and Daddy kind of worked on him for a minute, and my daddy said, well, I can write you a check right now if you do it for this amount. And the man agreed at $2,500. And Daddy wrote him a check. And I was just watching this happen. And so I followed my dad home. He drove his truck. I followed him and got back, and now I had this car. When I think about that car and I think about that situation, it's almost like just adding gasoline to a big roaring bonfire that's already burning. Don't add more gas to it. And so I had this car, and now my ego began to seep back into fluidity. My ego began to get into that car and drive that car. It's almost like sometimes I felt like I was not even in my body, because this part of me that would come in and sort of take over and run the show had stepped back in and was smiling. So I continued to do my job. I continued to come home. I continued to try to walk the straight and narrow. And one night, Patsy, the woman across the street, Michael's mother, who managed the gay bar, she was the kitchen manager at Tallulah's, she told me they were having an after-hours party. And if I wanted to come, that I was invited. And so I decided that I would go down and, just kind of hang out for a while and then come back at a decent hour. Well, that's when your brain starts tricking you. So I'd go down and I stayed at the bar and I drank and whatever. And I remember them locking the door, and it was around 4 a.m. And I think probably an hour or two went by, and there was cocaine on the pool tables. I remember that. Well, I remember saying, I've got to go. And Patsy waved at me and said, be careful. And I walked out, and the next thing I knew, I was looking up, and I was crashed into a BMW, and there were lights flashing. There were police lights and ambulance lights and all kinds of lights. And I remember a female policewoman pulling me out of my car, and I remember getting handcuffed. And then I remember being put into an ambulance, and I was bleeding. I had blood on me. And then after that, I don't remember anything except waking up and I was handcuffed and my ankles were shackled to a stretcher. And I was in the hallway in a hospital and I wasn't quite sure where. And I looked all around me and there were mostly men. And there was a guy with a gunshot wound. There were guys that were sick and beaten up. And it was this horrible, horrible situation. And I remember this woman came by me and I said, hey, I said, can you call my father? And she said, shh, you're under arrest. Don't talk. And I said, please, 448-7251. 448-7251. And I said his phone number. Well, a little time went by and she came back and she was standing over my head and she put her hand on my forehead and she leaned down and she whispered, I called your father and he will be here shortly. So that gave me a little bit of relief. Well, the next thing I know, I'm being taken into the back and these male orderlies started taking me and they were going to try to give me some sort of test. And I said, I want a blood test because somewhere along the alcoholic world, I learned that if you require a blood test, that it takes longer to process and that it won't show as much alcohol content. I don't know if there's any truth behind this, but I had always heard on the streets that you just ask for a blood test. So when these men came to get me, and actually they were taking me for x-rays, I started saying, well, I want a blood test. I want a blood test. Because I knew I was under arrest, so I knew I was in trouble. Well, these guys, they got a little bit angry toward me. And all I remember is they took me into this room and it was dark and they took me off the stretcher and they slung me up on the table. One of the guys was a watch. He was a watchman and they told him to watch the door. And these other two guys proceeded to hold me down on a table. And they said, be still. They started telling me to be still. Well, I started struggling, which was not the thing to do. And they were saying, you need to lay down. You need to shut the fuck up. I mean, they were getting very violent. And one of them took a pair of surgical scissors. And I had on cut off white painter's pants that I had cut into shorts. Well, he took these surgical scissors and as they held me down, he cut the right leg up all the way in half, cut the leg open and ripped these shorts off of me. And these men, they inserted a catheter into me and they punctured me in a way. And I saw stars and I was kicking and screaming and they were holding me down. They held my mouth shut and they catheterized me and I couldn't understand what was happening. And after all of this was done, they threw my clothes. They helped me kind of put these shorts back on and I had to tie them together. And I had on my basketball hoodie from South Carolina. It had blood all over it. And from there, I waited and I waited on a stretcher, still handcuffed. Well, daylight was there, and they rolled me out in a wheelchair, and the police unlocked the handcuffs and the ankle cuffs, and they backed a paddy wagon up to a loading dock. And it was as if I was like a piece of freight. And then they took me and they put me in the paddy wagon and he took my wrist and handcuffed me to a what looked like a ballet bar in the paddy wagon and they drove me across town to the Fulton County Jail and in downtown Atlanta. And I had been at Grady Hospital once I realized which hospital I was at. And Grady Hospital is sort of the trauma hospital of the downtown district. So now I'm at the Fulton County Jail, and I go into intake, and I get fingerprinted, mug shot, and I have to go into a cell and wait, kind of a holding cell. And I guess I was waiting for my father, but I remember falling asleep, and I was so sick. I was so sick. I was doing the deal with God once again, just begging God, please, please, please get me out of this and I'll never do this again. Please get me out of this and I'll never do it again. That ongoing begging. So time went by, and I remember them coming to get me. And my father, I saw him through this glass, and his friend from Caddick, he was with him, Bulldog Cooper, and he was driving a Trans Am. Well, my dad got him to drive him down there because I found out that my dad had lost his driver's license due to a DUI. So I looked at him and I just said, don't say anything to me. Please don't say anything to me. And I got in the car and we went home. I walked into my dad's apartment. I went straight to the refrigerator and I got 3 beers out of his refrigerator and I went into my room. And I drank these beers as fast as I could and I laid down in the floor with my quilt that had been my grandmother's. And I went to sleep. And when I got up, I knew that I was in so much trouble. I didn't know what I was going to do. And Daddy couldn't even talk to me. He wouldn't even talk to me. And so I continued to go to work and try to suit up and show up and be a person in the world. But I was crippled. I was crippled emotionally, and I was so fragile. So I rode that motorcycle back and forth, and I did that job, and I would come back to his apartment, and I would hang out with all the apartment people. And then one night, Rick from the post office invited me over, and I decided to say yes. At this point, I really didn't care what happened to me. I really didn't care anymore about myself. I was to a place where I felt like I had battered and beaten myself into this pulp. I had done this to myself, but of course, I didn't think that at the time. I thought that my luck was so bad and that I was just doing what everybody else was doing. Everybody else was partying and going to the bars and the clubs, and I could see this world happening in front of me, and everybody looked like they were coming out okay. Why did it affect me in this way? Why did I keep getting caught or having some dramatic episode? So I would blame myself like if I just did this, or if I just didn't drink that, or if I didn't do the drugs, or if I pulled away, or if I didn't hang out with that person. There was always some kind of mental masturbation, trying to figure it out, trying to figure out some loophole to keep doing what I was doing. And so I went to Rick's, and I remember watching a movie with him. And I remember thinking, this man is probably like 40. And I'm like a lot younger than him, but I didn't care. And I knew that he liked me. And so I just gave in to him. And I began having a sexual relationship with him. And that was it. He was very intelligent. He had a big vocabulary, or what I thought was a big vocabulary. Who knows? But I remember being with him and thinking, okay, if I just turn straight, it'll be okay. And that was this perpetual thing inside of me that would always come up. That's your problem. That's my problem. If I was straight, I could have a regular life. And so I went ahead and I would be with him and I would hang out with him, and then I would leave and I would feel so horrible about myself. It's like you can't get much lower, you think, but you can. And so this pattern would just continue, and my dad would be wondering where I'd been, and I would just say, oh, my friend from the post office, and I would talk about him like he was some great guy. And so then it was time for me to go to court about this DUI and this jail thing, and I'd been trying to save my money because I knew that it was going to be trouble. And, you know, there was no internet, so there was no way to find out what fines cost or fees. So I was saving as much money as I could, and I knew it was going to be a hefty fee. But one thing that other alcoholic type people would always tell me is, when you go in, just ask for your blood count, ask for your blood alcohol count. I didn't even know what that meant. And so I had a court hearing downtown, and I rode down there on my motorcycle because I still had my license. And they called me up to the pulpit. I guess it's not a pulpit, but the judge, wherever the big thing he's behind, it reminded me of church. And I walk up, and I kind of glanced, and I could see my paperwork. And so I said to him, he asked me if I'd like to say anything, and I said, could I please have my blood alcohol count? Well, he started looking at this sheet of paper, and he got real frustrated. And apparently there was not a blood alcohol count on there. And he took his gavel and he hit the table, and he says, readjourn, or I don't even know what word he used, but basically we're going to postpone this, find this blood alcohol count. And then he set another date, and it was like a month later, so it bought me another month. Well, in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, good. Maybe they'll just like forget it and throw it out, and I'll just won't be in trouble. So I go and I continue to save money because now I've got another month to kind of come up with the money I need for this. And I was really scared because I didn't have an attorney or anybody to go with me. I totally went and did this on my own. So this second time, I asked Tina in the wheelchair if she would drive me down there. And I wore my work uniform because I thought, okay, if I wear my work uniform, I'll look responsible. So she drove me in her hand-controlled car, the Dodge Dart light blue, and we go down and we sit in the audience. I don't think it's called an audience, but it felt like an audience because we're watching all these characters come before the judge and get sentenced. And he was very angry and very mean, and the people looked sad and disheveled and desperate. And of course, I didn't think that I was one of them because I had on my work uniform and I'm responsible, and I'm going to go to work after this. I'm just going to go ahead and pay my money and they'll let me go. And so I had told my job that I had gotten some speeding tickets and that I had to go to this court thing, and they seemed okay about that. So when the man called me up there, they called me forward. I came in my khaki work uniform and I stood there. And the judge once again asked me if there was anything I needed to say, and I said, yeah, could I ask my blood alcohol count? Well, he looked down at the piece of paper, and his eyes shot up at me, and he said, 1.0, comatose level. Bam! And he hits the gavel. He says, take her up. Well, 2 men handcuffed me right then and there, and I was in total shock. Well, Tina came down in her wheelchair, and she started saying, Judge, excuse me, Judge, excuse me. She's my driver. She's my ride. I don't have a way to get home. And he looks at her, and he said, ma'am, take a cab. And they took me in through processing of this jail again. And I had no idea, once again, where I was going or what was going to happen to me. All I knew is that my dealings and my begging with God hadn't gotten me anywhere.
Hammered is recorded and produced in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Asheville, North Carolina. It's narrated by Jill Haynie, produced by Maggie Briggs and Jill Haynie, and with sound design, editing, and music by Alexander Rodriguez. Our beautiful artwork was created by Lauren Caddick, and we'd like to send a special thanks out there to Minnie and Robin. You can check out our website, podcasthammered.com, and follow us on social media for updates.